let's each pose a question to Nina, and then we can try Kenny, and then we'll open up the floor to pent-up questions that I can just feel are in the audience. I was struck by the crisis of relationship comment that you made, and it is the crux of the theme that we are exploring here. And I personally think that my shrimp boating feeling is that we tend not to lean into conflict in our society, and I think the result is that it isolates us. But relationship is really formed by going through the conflict. And I was wondering if conflict has been any part of your discovery of leadership and adaptability. And just wondered if you could talk about your experience with conflict.
Sure, happy to. You want to give me yours too?
No, let's start with that.
Okay. Well, yeah. I think an aversion to conflict has been a really important part of my own learning, and it's we actually do quite a bit of work in our women's leadership retreats around something that we adapt from a Rockwood leadership training called Difficult Conversations. And it's really about the practice of how do we prepare ourselves to go into a difficult conversation and bring our full selves to bear there, because our tendency is to leave parts of ourselves behind, perhaps as self-protection, perhaps out of fear, for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite reference points around exactly what you're asking in conflict is a teacher of mine once said that relationships are the product of rupture and repair. And I find that really useful to remember, because when you're facing a rupture, it feels like the end of the world. And the truth is that when we address the ruptures and choose to head into it with an intention of repair, that's when our relationships get intimate and deeper.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Well, I first of all want to start by saying thank you to both of you for being here. And we've talked, Sarah and I have talked about the connection between your organization, the Bioneers, and the work of the Center for Interfaith Relations, and the collaboration that is possible there. So it's exciting that we're launching it here at Sacred Earth, Sacred Self. And so much of what you said really resonated personally with me. I have a good friend who told me every day I should do something that scares me. So when you were talking about fear, that really, it just kind of came to the forefront of my mind. But I want to go back again on the relationships and this concept of being collaborative and leading together rather than being singular and heroic. Can you expand on that a little bit more and maybe bring in some of the work that you do with your women in leadership, and then through Bioneers, how you reach out into the communities to build collaborative relationships?
That's a hard question. Okay, I'll try. Yipes. Well, in a way, the first thing that comes to mind that I want to say is that for me, one of the scariest things that I've headed into in the last few years has been a really deep exploration of how to be a better ally to people who live in very different circumstances and communities and different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so, because I guess what I want to say first is that partnership and collaboration is like a nice lofty goal, and the practice is hard. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what I've found is I have a desire for partnership and it's not well matched. Mm-hmm. And so I have to be really careful about whether my heart's leading me correctly in that or not, and be willing to weigh the evidence as things are revealing. But what occurred to me that I wanted to say was that one of the experiences that I've had now several times is having a knowledge of an injustice move from my head to my heart. Mm-hmm. And And the specific example I thought I'd offer is that a young Lakota woman came and took our training. And what typically happens for me is that I kind of fall in love with every one of the 20 women who are there in the training. And it's just part of my nature. And as I see them and I see who they're becoming, I'm just smitten. But this woman in particular really blew me away. And she was a mother of 2 and a very powerful leader and a cancer survivor and just a beautiful young woman. And we became quite close during the course of the retreat. And afterwards, I actually ran into her father and heard that she was in some despair. And I called her, and she told me that she had just learned that her 2 nieces had been raped. And they were like age 10 and 13. And I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with her. And what I realized as I listened to her just vent about her sense of powerlessness and how much she loved these 2 young women was that I had read books and articles and known about the high incidence of domestic violence and rape and abuse of women in Native country, but I had known about it from the distance that my privilege afforded me. Mm-hmm. And as I heard this woman, my heart just cracked open, and I was like, I am going to stand with you no matter what. I don't know what I can bring to this, but I know I'm going to have to bring something. Mm-hmm. And so at the moment, it's storytelling and bringing her into a network that I'm forming. But it's an example anyway of where I really felt called to create an alliance across lots of gaps of difference. And it's a really hard question because it's not easy. And I, my sense is that, in an intellectual way, it's really helpful to map out what do we have and what do we need and how can we benefit each other. Mm-hmm. But then there's something about chemistry and mystery that happens, and to leave room for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I'm so present in the answer to that question, but I was reading your book, Dream in the Future, and was it Bill McKibbins who said that it's the manual on how to get from despair to action. And I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and one's graduating from high school next week, and another, a 10th grader and a 5th grader. And it occurs to me that their education, although it's been a very fine one, has not had the eco-literacy that you reference in the book. And I'm wondering if you were to advise the school systems in Kentucky or in Louisville on what modifications need to be made to curriculum today, not only in the eco-literacy area, but in the resiliency skills that you address in a community. What would you advise our school systems?
Well, not my expertise, just to be clear, but
Okay.
that never stopped me before. But, the school system is incredibly important for obvious reasons, but for other reasons as well, which is we talk about, with Bioneers, turning education into action. And the reality, the metric that we're actually using for the organization now, it's not ROI, return on investment, it's ROE, return on engagement. And so schools are in a very unique position in their communities to become partners in restoration. We have work to do. We have very real work. It's not just about book learning or sitting in a classroom. And one of the big innovations that's happened, particularly already in school systems, is really around food, where kids grow gardens. And actually the sort of turnkey or the tipping point that happens is not so much the growing the food, but actually preparing it. Cooking seems to be the transformative act for young people. So that has, food is the biggest pathway we all eat. It's the single biggest, entry point for most people into an understanding of what we call the environment of nature and our interaction with it. So I think that's a good stepping stone, and you can do watershed restoration. You can do everything that was talked about this morning in terms of social justice and equality issues. of becoming really aware of the disparities, which are, a society that wastes its environment, wastes its people. It's real easy to understand. It's the same deal all the way around. So I think that building those bridges and actually engaging institutions, and when you go to higher education, one of our board members is David W. Orr, who has been at Oberlin for many years and has done an extraordinary project there called the Oberlin Project, where the university the college has partnered with the community of Oberlin. They're going carbon neutral by 2020. They're engaging the entire student body to do this as a partner with the community, not as the ivory tower at all. They've just raised $33 million to do a green downtown redevelopment that includes an arts and culture center precisely to bring forth this kind of education. And they've got a 70,000 acre green belt around the whole city that is enough to produce food for the entire region there, right? Locally, right on hand, organically. So I think that's the really big opportunity with the school system now, is education for action. And many kids, as Nina was talking, there's many different ways of learning, and certain people who are auditorially oriented do well in the current school situation. Kids who are kinesthetic and need to do stuff to learn, which is frankly most kids too, especially boys. So I think that there's so many ways to come at it right now, but the reality is we all need to be focused on the sheer scale of work that needs to be done. This is not something we can just study for a bunch more years. We have to act now. That's what I would say. Good.
Okay, so Kenny, you mentioned when you were talking, when you came to found, the two of you, the Bioneers, there was a looming environmental crisis. It was 1990. Here we are in your 25th year, and the crisis isn't looming anymore. But the whole mission of your organization has been about hope and about identifying solutions and a positive way forward. And personally, that's important to me. And I don't think we understand the science. I agree that the crisis it's here, it's upon us, but I'm not sure that we're gonna find our way out if we worry about, the end of the world. So I appreciate the organization is bringing hope to the equation. And I just wonder if you can reflect on 25 years later and perhaps provide some local examples of that hope and that success and the change that you think has happened.
Sure. David Orr, again, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up," right? So that's the kind of hope I can relate to, not some abstract, gee, let's hope it all changes. I think it's a verb. I went back, memory can be a real shapeshifter, right? And so I went back to all of the archives and files at the origin of Bioneers and read through everything from beginning to end to try to get a real documentary sense of what actually happened and how it evolved. And the most interesting thing I found was from Time magazine from 1988, late 1988, the Person of the Year issue, which I had in my folders. And it was actually, they made Endangered Earth the Person of the Year. It was the planet of the year. It was a beautiful Christo sculpture that was basically the Earth being shellacked and bound up. And what had happened was Jim Hansen had just testified before Congress for the first time as the Paul Revere of global warming in 1988. My brother Jesse had been working on this since 1976 at the National Academy of Sciences, so I knew some of that. But Hansen said, hey, we've got the decade of the 90s to dodge the bullet here. We can still avert this. And Time magazine had done this highly intelligent issue, uncharacteristically, really looking at solutions. And some of it was pretty dumb, but a lot of it was, at least they were really talking about the important stuff, all the kinds of issues that we would all be talking about today. And so I think, I didn't really remember this, but ironically at that moment there was huge hope. I mean, there was the sense that, wow, this is reaching the highest levels. They had just convened a conference in Colorado with all these major players, from companies, from everything. And there was a real awareness, and Hansen basically hoped to provoke a national reaction, and he did. But it came from Exxon and Mobil and the fossil fuel industry, who conducted the most successful disinformation campaign in history. That was a catastrophic success that sowed denial, doubt, and delay. I mean, delay above all. They knew exactly what they were doing. It was psychopathic behavior, as we like to say. And so, 10 years into it, we were sort of reframing. And what I would say now is that it's been stunning to see the growth of this movement of movements that we are a part of and that we've helped to hopefully shape and influence a little bit, or at least to connect people across all these different areas. And the solutions are absolutely present, except some of the problems have turned into predicaments for which, a problem has a clear solution. A predicament, there is no solution. All you can do is respond, adapt, like climate disruption. I mean, there isn't a solution for that now. We're in it,
Right.
We've roused the cobra. So I think that's the biggest difference, but our theme this year, which we don't usually do, but it's growing the movement, the world we want, and how to get there. And looking back, what I realize is it is unbelievable how much knowledge, skill, and actually really serious, I know people who can say these are the 5 game changers in the field of eco-design, or we talk about the rights of nature and revoking corporate rights. Those are game changers. I mean, if we manage to do that at the whole, you talked about solving for pattern. So we decided to talk not just with our speakers about that, but to put it out to the entire Bioneers community. All of you are invited to respond. We're going to start promoting this imminently, and we're going to start to gather the collective knowledge, that is widely shared, to really kind of lay out a trellis for the next 5-6 years. And if you're not currently engaged and you want to get engaged, here's whether it's food systems or education or eco-design or social justice or racial, these are the game-changing. Here's some pathways you can pursue. And a lot of times people ask me, well, okay, I get it. What do I do? And man, my life is so filled with left turns, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I don't like to tell other people what to do. I'm very skittish about that. So, all I can say is it's great that you're asking that question. That's the first step. That's the entry point. And follow your heart, follow your passions and your interests, meet the people, go out and learn and connect and find the people that you want to play and work with, and your path will reveal.
Perhaps we should hear from our audience.
Yeah, open it up.
Open it to some questions.
Over this way.
Thank you both for a wonderful talk. As a boy in the 1960s, I had the obligatory picture book of dinosaurs, and the last chapter was about the death of the dinosaurs, the end of the era of dinosaurs, and they had a lovely picture of dinosaurs towering overhead, the greenery, and down in the underbrush are these little proto-mammals. And they made the point that there were these little critters that basically the descendants of whom became the next set of species that dominated the Earth. And in your 25 years of Bioneers, you've been exposed to hundreds, thousands of amazing, innovative ideas. I'm wondering what you're it's pretty easy for us all to identify what the dinosaurs are in our scenario, the fossil fuel industries that you were just speaking of, Kenny, and so on, the economic system, some of the political pathologies that we have. What do you think might be some of the proto-mammals lurking in the underbrush now that might end up being the dominant species after the dinosaurs die?
Well, or what I'm hearing you ask, let me ask if this is correct. Are there strategies that seem like they're really sort of keystone, right? I think actually that we are in this moment of reinventing everything about how we live on Earth and with each other. So in a sense, I would say, it's all up for reinvention, which is the good news and the bad news. But given that, I think that there are policy innovations. I think that embedding the rights of nature is an extraordinary thing. And actually, the city of Spokane is on the verge of actually achieving that. So, you asked something about the local innovations. There are cities that, working with their local Bioneers community, have identified strategies that they're actually implementing, whether it's community gardens, whether it's social or racial justice oriented, or whether it's embedding a policy. So I think that's an example of something. I think that what was mentioned here this morning around urban gardens and food sovereignty and developing a whole lot more farmers of every generation and every ethnicity is an incredibly important strategy. And I think water is going to be the currency of the time ahead. I think actually, I think we're entering into an economy that's both the relationship economy and a water economy. And that water is the most valuable thing we could be paying attention to right now, as well as reconnecting our web of relations, because I think that's the only real security, actually, is being connected with each other.
Yeah, is that Barry out there? Yeah. Hey.
Oh, hi, Barry.
Really good question. That's why we're doing this World We Want and How to Get There, and inviting a lot of people to participate in that. But I didn't get to talk about it, but nature does not favor centralization, right? If you look at the reason is very simple, that if things are too tightly connected and too concentrated, if the system crashes, the whole system crashes all at once. So that's why you find nature to be very decentralized and have actually quite a few redundancies where things are, stashed in a number of places one way or the other. In industrial design, redundancy is considered an inefficiency, right? So it's a very, very different viewpoint. So what we're already seeing and going to see much more of is a much greater decentralization. That means distributed clean energy at local and regional levels. It means much more localized food systems. And they'll never be entirely local, nor should they be. I mean, that's not the way it's going to work. But the same goes for economies, building much more localized economies that really feed the data are all there about how much better it is when money stays in a community and actually circulates. So I think that at large is going to be the key word. We've moved beyond sustainability to resilience, because we're in for massive change now, and what you want to do is be able to continue to adapt. So these are keys to resilience, and we started this program in, I guess, 2001, I'm not sure, but what was originally called the Beaming Bioneers of local, what began as conferences and then evolved in many cases into year-round initiatives, such as what goes on here with Bluegrass Bioneers. And we're now knitting that into a very deliberate network as a learning and action network, because a lot of people are figuring stuff out in one place, but then it doesn't migrate. It just stays there. So we need to have kind of a living laboratory of communities of practice that is a learning and action network, where people start to say, like Nina mentioned Spokane, what they've done is to design a community bill of rights based on a lot of stuff that would be obvious, like a living wage and things of that nature, or worker rights. But what they've done is to revoke corporate personhood and institute rights for nature. The first time on the ballot, and Spokane is a very red city. Yeah. Very, very conservative, second largest city in Washington State. The first time on the ballot, they got 24% of the vote. And the second time, despite massive corporate out-of-state money that came in, including the National Chamber of Commerce, they got 49.2% of the vote, right? So it's going to tip. It's coming. So we did a conference call with a bunch of our, resilient communities, Beaming Bioneers communities, to share not just the template. Anybody can get the template on the web, but to ask the organizers to explain how they went about it, what were the challenges that came, the blowback, the barriers, how do you actually organize? So we're instituting a whole series of stuff around that, in the belief that, Tip O'Neill, the famous politician, once said all politics is local. Well, at one level, all ecology is local too, right? You've got your food shed, your water shed, your energy shed, and you've also got your culture shed, right? And Bluegrass is not the same as, for example, Salt Lake City, So anyway, that's something. Biomimicry is already starting to really move into major business channels, and is going to become huge as a basic in the design arena. The Living Building Challenge, which probably some of you are familiar with, Jason McLennan, and you could Google that on the web, but it's a whole different level of what building means, of being part of the environment and actually matching nature's services. Buildings that have all their own energy, all recycled, blah, blah. Anyway, I go on. The rights of nature is a game changer. If we don't deal with some of the corporate power issues, the rest is commentary. That has to change and is changing, I think. And then, I think there's a lot of other inner things that need to happen right now. And when you think back to 911 in New York, George W. Bush at the time told everybody to go shopping. That was the response, if you remember, right? Which is talk about a non-starter. And so what people wanted to do was to grieve and to commune with each other. And they created altars and shrines, and people were relating to each other on the street. And it was a profound, profound time. And it's never really gone away in that sense. And I think we're, as Dr. Bernie Siegel, the cancer surgeon, said, pain is God's reset button, right? And we're going to be brought to our knees. I mean, the loss, the dislocation, the suffering, it's not just nature that's hurting, it's people, big time. And so I think we're going to be brought back to our most basic values. And, the most basic value, I mean, what we talk about is this declaration of interdependence. Oneness is real, I mean, this is a fact of life. And I think that that's the shift in consciousness and the change of heart that's already underway, that I think what you're doing here is so, so important. And I was very moved and very startled, actually, by a comment I think that Ausubel made yesterday about that we're having these conversations in public, and then in private we're having really different conversations. And that is so, so true. And I've been having that identical experience, and we've been consciously talking about that with Bioneers, that we need to bring that out front, those much deeper, much more human conversations. And so I really believe what you're doing here is incredibly important. And for me, I believe the faith community is actually one of the most important political forces on the planet right now. 80% of the world's people, and enormous resources as well, but that's even less important than the human element of that. And I think, when you get down to it, that's about values and about connection and what our cosmology is, and recognizing that truly we are all one, and so anyway.
Wonderful. We have a question here.
Yeah, so I've been to 5 of the 6 last Bioneers conferences in San Rafael, what they call the Headwaters Conference. And I always have trouble telling my friends exactly what it is and why they should go. So I wonder if Kenny and Nina could do that succinctly. I would like to see all of you there.
Well, let me first just recognize that's Polly Howells. And Polly is recently the chair of our board and currently serving as a board member of Bioneers. So thank you, Polly. And if you have questions about Bioneers, please ask Polly. She'll
great.
get practice at saying what it is. But, I find that I describe Bioneers differently depending on who I'm talking to. But one of the ways that I describe it is that it is this collection of practitioners of visionary and practical solutions for helping heal our relations with ourselves, each other, and the earth. Another way that I sometimes describe it is that we do like an environmental and social star search to identify really leading edge projects and people whose ideas we think have tremendous transformative power, and that everyone needs to know about, because the mainstream media tends to cover the bad news but not the good news. So really we identify, we make visible the world that's possible today. And I think that that's, as I've lived with it for a long time, I've found that that's of incredible value.
Yeah, basically, people ask what's the elevator speech, and it doesn't really fit into a soundbite. I always ask, how many floors are we going up? I hope it's the penthouse. But, the flip answer that I give is Bioneers is a natural antidepressant. And, it is so clear, the solutions are so profound, and the people are so brilliant, and there's so much heart that you can't help but being hopeful from the experience. It's like an altered state or something. And, a friend who is sort of the shadow co-founder of Bioneers once called it the Church of Bioneers, actually. And in the best sense, I think, that it is that. But our focus this year is really around growing the movement, because we believe that's what it's going to come down to now. This really has matured. The work has reached a tipping point and a point of maturation where it is absolutely ready to go to scale. And there are some areas where we don't know exactly what to do, but we definitely know what directions to head in. And if there were real resources put behind this and political will, it would move. It would move really quickly. And Jay Harmon, whom I mentioned, the spiral biomimic guy earlier, I talked with him a few years ago. We took a little mini Bioneers to Hong Kong to talk to Chinese mayors. It was really interesting, all over China. And the mayors in China, by the way, were out competing each other for who was greener. It was an incredible experience, seriously. I mean, when the irony is this, essentially authoritarian state with the stroke of a pen, if China says we're going green, they're going green, man. It was amazing to witness. But so anyway, Jay said, I said, so what would it take to really put biomimicry over the top? And he said, basically, there's some basic science that we really haven't been able to do. It would cost between $1 and $3 billion. That would unleash an industry like the world has never seen. 1 to 3 billion isn't even a rounding error in a federal budget. I mean, seriously, they dropped that on, that's pocket change in Congress, right? So I don't care if it's the US or China or Brazil. I mean, we're pushing that wherever we go, I mean, who's going to step up and change the course of history with one stroke of a pen? So, I mean, that's the kind of thing we're really looking for and hoping to elicit from our whole amazing, community. And I think the other thing that happens for me at Bioneers that is sort of indescribable, but the main hall holds about 2,000 people. And, the truth is, if you scratch the surface, there are a lot of fault lines, right? There are the Luddites and the techno-utopians. There are people who are spiritually oriented and people who are adamantly secular, right? I mean, you can go down the list. And that's what's held us back so much in many ways, is those divisions and those separations. And I think what we're able to do is to create a field where nature is at the center for all of us, because we are children of Mother Earth, and there's extraordinary reverence and wonder involved in that. Yet at the same time, there's a tremendous sense of solidarity and common ground, and that we are all rowing in the same direction, and that's the intention. And so that's to me the magic of it, is to be able to have that occur. And one of the most interesting experiences I had a few years ago, we offer as many scholarships as we can, and particularly to a lot of indigenous youth and people of color and low-income folks and elders and students and all of that, as much as we can get money for. And so this one really tough-looking Latino kid was standing outside the exhibit hall in the afternoon with big tattoos all over his arms, and was clearly there with Bioneers. He wasn't from Marin County, that was clear. And so I was just, really happy he was there, and I just went over to say hello. And he kind of looked me deep in the eye and said, I'm like super critical. I always find everything that's wrong, and I can't find anything that's wrong with this. I really like this. So that was wonderful to hear, but I'm always, I really want to understand what people are responding to exactly. So I pressed him a little bit about that, and he said, that spiral guy. It wasn't about social justice. It was like, wow, the signature of the cosmos is the spiral, and I'm part of that. And I think that's kind of what this is about here right now,
Yeah.
So, and I think that's ultimately what's going to get us through, that sense that we are all from that source. So
I just want to add one thing, because I'm not sure I've said it clearly enough, and it's become really important to me, is to say that I came very late in my life to this work around women and the feminine. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been lucky enough to attend the UN Commission on the Status of Women and really research and explore what are women achieving all over the world. And what I found consistently is that the data is in. What's happening around the world is that coalitions of grassroots women are making the most profound ecological and social change. It's happening in Liberia, it's happening all over, and in Kenya, and there are extraordinary examples of it. And so part of my vision and my dedication and my enthusiasm and my hope is trusting that as we all come into our own voices and our own leadership more fully, that we can really create a network of diverse women across generations, across ethnicities, across disciplines, because together I really believe we can be unstoppable, and that we're part of the transformative mojo that's needed in this time to help shift our culture towards a life-affirming, sacred, and healthy future. So.
Can I just add one quick thing to that? So, yeah, I want to add my 2 cents to that, which is that,
You're on the stage with 3 women.
whoa.
We're over time.
Surrounded. So I've lived with this for a while. But I've been working on, I'm doing a film project that has nothing whatsoever to do with Bioneers, but it's about this, or based on the work of this guy, Richard Tarnas. I don't know if you would know him, Tarnas, who wrote 2 sort of magnum opus books. And one of them, the first one, is called The Passion of the Western Mind. And it's the most extraordinary deconstruction of Western civilization that I've ever come across. And very fair and balanced. I mean, it's not a hit job at all. It's truly thoughtful. But anyway, clearly Western civilization has had an enormous shadow, along with many great things that have come from it. You know, it's a shadow that has basically led us to Land's End today and threatens to destroy civilization as we know it. So you get to the end of this book and you're kind of wondering, okay, Rick, what does it all mean, you know? And what he said is that the single biggest signature of Western civilization is that almost the entire pantheon is masculine, and that has represented this extreme version of that to the exclusion of the other, the feminine, you know, people of color, whatever the other is in that way. And in a sense, if there's one trim tab that kind of changes everything, it is about that rebalancing of the masculine and feminine. And what we know from studies and data today, I mean, it's women all over the world. This is happening spontaneously. It's not that it's an organized movement even as such. It's a zeitgeist, an idea whose time has come, that women everywhere are rising up in different ways. And what the data show is that when you get about 30% women in any given context, it shifts the whole thing. And that the values change, the priorities change, and the actions change. And so, you know, if I were going to focus on one single thing at this point, it would actually be exactly that, and what you know, Nina has been promoting and trying to convince me of for years. So,
Nice
job.
So in the spirit of that, maybe Nina, you could actually bring this to a close with the ringing of our singing bowl. But just prior
Thank you all.
to
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you all have been tremendously inspirational. Thank you. And I will mention there's
So come visit us in the lobby.
a book signing, and a reception to follow, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.